take off the scapegoat name tag at the Narcissistic Families Conference. I recently thought about the metaphor of a business conference for what can happen when a narcissistic family puts a child in the role of scapegoat. In a business conference, the attendees, are required to wear name tags, and there's usually a conference agenda that lists out who's doing what, speaking, and so forth, and when. The most revered member of the conference usually gives the kickoff or keynote speech. Then there are other high-status members who give presentations. It's usually a harmless and useful arrangement in the regular world. But the Narcissistic Families Conference goes a little differently. Here, the narcissistic parent is always giving the keynote address, and the enabling family members often get to give their own presentations. But in the conference agenda of the narcissistic family, there are explicit instructions for the members to treat one specific attendee very poorly. These instructions could read like, if you ever see fill in the blank, whom the scapegoated person, in the hallways or at one of the talks, be sure to put them down verbally, react like what they think and feel is crazy, and talk unkindly about them to other conference attendees, roll your eyes whenever they start to speak, and gang up on them with other conference attendees whenever you have the chance, and you'll be able to identify this person because they will have scapegoat written on their name tag. Again, this is all hypothetical, but I think it's a good descriptor of what really happens in the narcissistic family. In today's video, I want to show how the narcissistic family artificially designates a child as the scapegoat and how the scapegoat survivor can begin to see through this artificiality. I think metaphor can be a powerful tool for encapsulating a false reality that has been imposed upon you while mapping out what might be possible now. And I'm going to use this metaphor of the conference and what happens when the scapegoat leaves the conference as a way to understand and envision the process of recovery for the scapegoat survivor. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I specialize in helping people recover from narcissistic abuse. So narcissistic abuse can leave us feeling lost and estranged from our very senses of who we are in the world. So in individual therapy and my online course on recovery from narcissistic abuse, I try to offer a map that allows survivors to come back to the quality of life that they know they deserve somewhere in themselves. And of course, each survivor must travel this path themselves, but a map, I think, can be tremendously important to do this with. And there are 3 features on the map that I'll call the 3 pillars to recovery. Pillar number 1 is making sense of what happened so that you know the abuse was not your fault. Pillar number 2 is gaining psychological, emotional, and maybe physical distance from the narcissistic abuser. And pillar number 3 is living in defiance of the narcissist's rules. And lastly, you can't do this in a vacuum. I think it's essential to find and participate in relationships and communities of people who get, validate, and support you along your path. My online course on recovery from narcissistic abuse offers a strategy that corresponds to these 3 pillars and offers a community within which to do it via an accompanying private Facebook group. You can check it out by clicking here, or you can find the link in the description box below. And today's video falls under pillar number 3, living in defiance of the narcissist's rules. All of these videos are organized according to the 3 pillars into playlists, so please check them out if that's of interest to you. Also, if you were a scapegoat survivor of a narcissistic parent or partner, then I'd encourage you to check out my free ebook on the topic. It's called Surviving Narcissistic Abuse as the Scapegoat, and goes into other important aspects of what it's like to be in the shoes of the scapegoated child or partner, of the narcissistic abuser. From, self-limiting beliefs about yourself that you may have had to adopt to survive, to why the narcissistic personality is so structured to put the people closest to them down. I think this ebook can help you realize how none of this abuse was your fault, but was rather the product of the narcissist's own psychological and emotional problems. You can find the link to the book in the description box below or by clicking here. So on to the Narcissistic Family Conference. If you were born into a family with a narcissistic parent and got the designation of scapegoat, then your experience might kind of apply to what I just described. When you walked into your house, it was likely apparent and even second nature to be told to put on the scapegoat name tag and be ready to be mistreated in the ways that the sort of conference agenda or brochure specified. In fact, the narcissistic parent you could think of as like the person at the front of the conference where you got to go to sign in and be given a name tag. So the scapegoat name tag was already lying there on the table, and it had to be given to somebody. You happen to be the person who got it. An image to think about is if you've ever seen the movie Grosse Point Blank with John Cusack and Minnie Driver, and this won't spoil, it's a great movie in my opinion, but they go to their reunion and there's all these name tags for everyone at the reunion, and that's really the image that kind of comes to mind in this scenario. So there's a real arbitrariness to what makes the child get the scapegoat name tag. It's more that the name tag exists and must be assigned than having anything to do with who the child actually is. Of course, in the confines of the conference, that arbitrariness is not acknowledged. The child wearing the scapegoat name tag is assumed to deserve that designation. It's, of course, again, in the conference, not the result of the conference organizer's psychopathology or psychological disturbance. Well, now let's talk about leaving the conference of the narcissistic family. For the scapegoat child and later adolescent and adult, life can take them in directions that depart from the narcissistic family's agenda at the conference. When the scapegoat survivor goes in these other directions, they may start to notice how the scapegoat name tag only applies to them at the family's conference. So at school and or with their friends, they might notice being reacted to in much different ways. And even if they're just little snippets, they may have felt respected and not singled out in the way they routinely were at the conference, the family's conference. And as this kind of experience accrues and the scapegoat survivor grows to experience or gain the possibility of a sense of a different world outside of the conference, the scapegoat survivor may begin to question the rules and regulations of the family's conference, which they were forced to attend. So the survivor may even seek frames of reference with other non-conference goers to get perspective on how wrong and corrupted the family conference structure actually was. So as this new and accurate understanding gets solidified, the scapegoat survivor grows to realize the supposed identity they had at the conference was really just a name tag. It was not who they actually were. At this point, the scapegoat survivor may decide never to set foot in that conference again. And this is how it's useful to cultivate distance from the narcissistic family's conference. Distance prevents you from having to wear the scapegoat name tag and or having it slapped onto you by another conference goer or the conference organizer. So now let's extend the metaphor to what happens when the scapegoat survivor rips off the scapegoat name tag. Well, as the scapegoat survivor gets distance from the narcissistic family's conference, they may look down, again, figuratively, and notice the name tag on their shirt. I think an important time in recovery comes when another family member, sort of again, metaphorically, encounters the scapegoat survivor outside of the conference. That family member may try to pick up where they left off at the conference and treat the survivor like they are different, crazy, or destructive in one way or another. At this point, the survivor may look down and realize that this other family member still thinks the conference rules apply when the survivor now knows they don't. So the survivor in this scene kind of looks down, pulls the name tag off of them, looks at the family member and just says very firmly but matter-of-factly that this is not how things are going to go anymore. In these moments, it's the survivor's recognition that they are not who they used to have to be that is most powerful. The survivor already possesses themselves and the power of that knowledge and is simply relaying that to the family member who still has the misimpression about the survivor, the misimpression being that they're still at the conference and that the survivor deserves to be mistreated as though they were at the conference and the survivor is wearing that name tag. Well, this encounter can even happen in the scapegoat survivor's own mind, and when it happens, there may be a quiet peace and sense of coming to one's real self that may accompany it. Well, I hope the metaphor of the conference and name tags can be useful to you in your own process of recovery from narcissistic abuse, particularly if you were the scapegoat survivor. You know, as with all these kind of tactics, I think they come with promise, but also patience, and I think compassion is needed. That the application of this kind of metaphor, you know, to yourself and your own, you know, sense of your personal history may feel really helpful in the moment. But I would encourage you not to get discouraged if that sort of sense of helpfulness doesn't continue. That you know, this process of recovery tends to be cyclical, but kind of moving in an upward trajectory. But in those cycles can be ups and can be relative downs. But kind of like in the stock market, things tend to move up. The lows tend to there tend to be higher lows, so as it's trekking up, and higher highs. But you know, it's a process. So I just think that's an important caveat here to all these tactics, is to sort of protect your morale as you kind of persist in your recovery process, and hopefully use these tools in ways that you know, prove helpful along the way. Well, again, thank you for your consistent engagement and participation in the comments with these videos, and I hope you found this week's video useful in your own process, and look forward to posting again next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Take care.